Welcome to No Markz Allowed. This is the show that covers sports, sneakers, and culture. And let's get straight to it. The Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves had a series for the ages. Like, Minnesota started off 2-0, made Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic look, pedestrian the first two games. So you had all the media pundits like Perk, Stephen A. Smith saying they was gonna get swept. A lot of people was jumping on the bandwagon real quick and was like, I knew Minnesota was gonna win the championship. No, they didn't. Everybody thought the Western Conference Finals was gonna be the Phoenix Suns with the big three, Durant, Bale, and Booker versus the defending champs Denver Nuggets. Now, after two games of Minnesota winning, because you see how they play defense, and they had the big men and the perimeter the defender and Jaden McDaniels giving Kevin KD and Devin Booker hell. You probably say, "Wow, we might know something here. Minnesota might be able to go far in these playoffs." But you didn't know before the playoffs start Minnesota was going to be that good because they wasn't shown on TV that much, and all everyone ever talked about was the Lakers, the Knicks, the Celtics, the Nuggets, the same team, Milwaukee, the same teams they show every week on NBA, on ESPN, and TNT. Nobody knew about Minnesota unless you watched NBA League Pass, which I am a subscriber. But let's get back to the point because not only did the Timberwolves sweep the Phoenix Suns, they also won the first two on Denver's home soil. So then people was like, oh, Denver's done. Denver's done. But a lot of people say the series doesn't start into game three. Some people say it doesn't start into game five. Because in game three and four, Denver looked every bit of the world champions they were by defeating the Minnesota Timberwolves and making them look like, okay, you are who you are. You shouldn't be here on the same court with us. And this was on Minnesota's home court. The synergy between Michael Porter, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, they had a de facto big four. The way it was moving and shaking, they blew Minnesota out one game. The other game, they shut Anthony Edwards down. So now they go back to Denver in game five and they blow Minnesota out the freaking water. And it was crazy because with that momentum, and Denver won, three straight. Minnesota won two. So it looks like Minnesota was dead in the water after getting beat like that three times in a row. You might as well just hang it up. But game six, I was like, I'm thinking Minnesota is going to win this one because the way Denver played the three games after they lost two, it's hard to sustain that level of excellence. So I think Denver was tired in game three and they got blew out by over 40 points. Anthony Edwards started off early. Carl Anthony Towns, he didn't score a lot, but he did a lot of other things like help defend Jokic, blocked a few shots. Then you had Jaden McDaniels that had like over 17 points, something like that. Rudy Gobert was in double digits. They just blew Denver out the water. And I wouldn't say Denver just gave up and said, okay, we got game seven at home. They just ran out of gas in game six. So now, game seven, does Denver run out of gas again? Well, in the beginning of game seven, it looked like, you know, Minnesota was on their way to the win. They had a 15-point lead at half, but they should have been up by like 22 because Anthony Davis only had like 4 points at halftime. But not Anthony Davis, I'm sorry. Anthony Edwards only had 4 points at halftime, and it seems like Denver was going to win this game seven. This is one of the game sevens that the home team is going to win. Like it's going like central casting would cast it. But in the second half, Jokic started off cold. Murray started off cold. And Minnesota kept creeping. Jaden McDaniels kept hitting threes. Rudy Gobert was getting block shots. He was getting rebounds. And then Edwards seen a few balls going, and it was all over. Because they were still leaving Mike Conley open and Jaden McDaniels open, even though Edwards was struggling. So when Edwards would drive to the hole, he'll kick it out to the veteran Mike Conley, or he'll kick it out to young Jaden McDaniels, and they hit the open threes. Jaden McDaniels is a 3-and-D guy, if 3-and-D guys was a person, which they actually are. But Where was Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter? Now this is 3 games in a row Michael Porter stunk. He had 2 stinkers in the win against Minnesota in game 5 and a stinker in the loss against Minnesota in game 6. So you figure, Michael Porter would come back. He's just not going to have 3 straight games. He had below 10 points. Aaron Gordon, what are you doing with below 10 points in a game 7? This might be the biggest choke job of their careers, especially Aaron Gordon at this young stage, because Jokic and Murray, the reason they ran out of gas in game 7 because they was doing every fucking thing. Jokic is rebounding. He's assisting. He's scoring. Jamal Murray is having the best game that he had after 2 subpar games in a subpar series. Jamal Murray had the game you would expect Jamal Murray to have. But when you get nothing from Michael Porter, you get nothing from Caldwell Pope, you get nothing from Reggie Jackson, and you get nothing from Aaron Gordon, you score below 100 points, which is an anomaly in the NBA. But this playoffs, we've been seeing a lot of defense and a lot of games below 100. So I feel like Minnesota just wore them young boys, wore them down. And that's the difference between Minnesota winning in game 7 and Lakers losing in 5. The Lakers didn't have the young horses to, guide them through the end of the game to finish the game. Anthony Edwards showed leadership abilities all this playoffs. Even in the games they won against Phoenix, when he didn't score, he didn't force his shots. He made sure he found Karl Anthony Towns, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid. And how big was Naz Reid, the 6th man of the year? Because he only had 2 points at half. But he caught some, off the rim dunks, hit a few threes, drove to the hole. He showed up. He might have not showed up the whole game, but he showed up when he needed to. Karl Anthony Towns had over 23 points. I said Karl Anthony Towns would have to score over 20 points a game if Minnesota wanted to win. Well, in all the games they won, Karl Anthony Towns had 20 or more points, except for game 6 when they blew him out. They didn't need that much. So Karl Anthony Towns is going to be a vital part of, Minnesota going forward and winning this Western Conference Finals, and also going to the NBA Finals and defeating Boston Celtics. It's all about Karl Anthony Towns. You got to be that star player you were before Anthony Edwards got there, when they had D'Angelo Russell and Mike Conley. You got to go back to that Karl Anthony Towns. You got to post. You got to drive to the lane. You cannot hang out as a 7-footer just camped out on the 3-point line. But shout out to Edwards, because he's given, Karl Anthony Towns all the confidence he needs. He's saying, "Yo, you are the biggest big man. You're the best big man in the league today. The baddest big man in the league today." No one Karl Anthony Towns isn't, but he's a professional athlete. If he keeps hearing that encouragement, he'll take that to the head and believe in himself more, because Anthony Edwards believes in him, and he'll go off. See, the thing about Anthony Edwards is he don't shy down from the funk, and he also don't force the funk. He puts his trust in his teammates, sort of like LeBron James does. And he also has that killer instinct like Michael Jordan did. So he can be LeBron and Magic when he wants to be LeBron and Magic. He can be Michael Jordan and Kobe when he wants to be Michael Jordan and Kobe. He's a true definition of the winner. So let's see how far they go in this NBA playoffs. They're at the Western Conference Finals, which is a huge sign when your best players are so young and you're at that stage. Now let's take it back to the world's most famous arena, the Madison Square Garden, where we had another game 7 between 2 fierce rivals, the Knicks and the Pacers. You know the history of this rivalry with Reggie Miller, Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Dale Davis, Antonio Davis. It got physical. You know the back and forth going between Spike Lee and Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller with the choke sign. Reggie Miller also scoring like 9 points in like 15 seconds to win the game. That was a classic Knick loss. I'll say Indiana is New York's most hated rival. I'll say Chicago first, because the Bulls stopped Ewing and those great teams in New York from getting the title. Then you had the Miami Heat. Remember, Jeff Van Gundy was on the floor grabbing the leg of one of the Heat players while their team was in the squabble, and then I would say Indiana Pacers. But New York, I mean, I feel like they was overachievers and they was slept on. Philly slept on them. They thought they was going to beat New York because they knew Randall wasn't going to be there, and they looking at the Villanova 3, Brunson, DiFrancesco, and Hart with Hartenstein. I know Philadelphia fans and fucking Philadelphia 76er players was rubbing their hands like Bird. Man, they thought, yeah, this is a definitely first round advancement. But the New York Knicks had other players. They just outworked Philly. Jalen Brunson scored and did whatever he wanted against Philly, and they end up advancing to Indiana. Now, I feel like the first two games went New York's way, and they were like, you know, on their way of thinking, okay, we might sweep this team. Like, the big three in New York, I would say Hart, DiFrancesco, and Brunson was the Villanova 3. They did what the big three should have done in Phoenix, was score and come up. Like, it's crazy how, you know, the Knicks overachieved and almost got to the NBA Finals. But it was that game, I think one of the games that Indiana stole in New York. When Halliburton went off, he scored over 20 that game. That was when we had a series. And then the Knicks had a chance to close them out in Indiana, but Nembhard hit a crazy like 25 to 28 foot three-pointer to send it to Game 7. And this is when you got the historic Game 7, where it's up to whose role player is going to show up, whose stars are going to show up. Jalen Brunson caught the injury bug at the wrong time, right when New York was making a run. But Halliburton started off crazy. This was a record-breaking shooting night for the Indiana Pacers. They was hitting everything. And you see McBride go off in Game 6 and had a couple of above 15-point games or above 10-point games. He was a significant role player in the Knicks getting this far. He did nothing. OG Anunoby came off the bench, did nothing. Hartenstein looked like the second coming of Ben Wallace early in the series, and against Philadelphia, offensive rebounds galore, did nothing. This is the same thing the role players in Denver did at home in their Game 7 against the Minnesota. Porter, Jackson, Braun, Aaron Gordon did nothing. So when you have role players that do nothing, you're gonna lose the game. What did Indiana's role players do? DJ McConnell had over double digits. Nembhard had over double digits. All 5 Indiana starters went over double figures. So Siakam could have had a huge game, but he got support from Miles Turner, Nembhard, Nesmith, TJ McConnell. And this is why the Indiana Pacers are going to the finals. And I feel like if they want to, not the finals, but the Eastern Conference Finals, but if they want to advance and go to the finals, I feel like Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton would have to score over 20 points a game, every game of the finals. Because Boston, they put up points. They got a team that can put up points. Even without Kristaps Porzingis, you still got Jrue Holiday, Al Horford, who else? Derek White, he had some huge games this year, 30 points, 25 points. Then you got the two boppers, the 2 home run hitters, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So Indiana, I mean, Halliburton needs to start off as a scorer, then facilitate. He can't facilitate first and become a scorer second. Those 13 points, 15-point games is not going to get you a win against Boston. I'm sorry. So, in order of them to beat Boston, I would like to see Halliburton and, Pascal Siakam to take over the rounds as a scorer. Because then you'll free up Miles Turner on the inside to get dunks. You'll free him up to hit open 3-point shots. and you would just have that Boston defense flustered. Also, I would like to say that Boston, they got some bulletin board material in this Eastern Conference Finals. Charles Barkley and several people on television said the Celtics cannot win the championship without Kristaps Porzingis. Now, they've been a title contender for years with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown without Kristaps Porzingis. So will that, motivate Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? But people like to say, well, if you need motivation from bulletin board material, you shouldn't be in the league. No. Athletes read everything and listen to everything, and they know everything that's going around. And what's being said about them. So I'm looking forward to both of these conference finals. Now let's get back to the battle of the MVP candidates. Luka Doncic came third in the voting. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander came in second. And this was a great series. But I feel like the Mavs' two-star players was a little bit too unselfish. I really think the Mavs could have won this series in 5 or 6 games. Well, they ended up winning it in 6, but they could have won it in like at least 5. I mean, I feel like if they was a little bit unselfish, like Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, I feel like they passed the ball too much and deferred to the role players. Like, they loved lobbing the ball to Derek Jones and Lively and Gafford for those exciting dunks. But when it was getting towards the end of the game, like, Luka and Kyrie was kind of out of sync. Like, Kyrie failed to crack 10 points a few games, I think. Or I know he didn't have 20. He had like over 20 game 6, the closeout game. But I feel like OKC could have stole this series from Dallas. And I feel like against Minnesota, I feel like Kyrie and Luka have to do much more. Luka has to score more. Quit kicking the ball out to Derek Jones and P.J. Washington. You see P.J. Washington the last 2 games of the series, they were lackluster. I mean, Kyrie Irving needs to be a scorer first and then facilitate. Like, I don't think they can do that with Minnesota. You see what I'm saying? Minnesota has a great defense. Now, Jaden McDaniels is going to be on Luka Doncic. Anthony Edwards said he's going to take Kyrie, so I want to see if Kyrie can break, Anthony Edwards' ankles, or if Anthony Edwards can break Kyrie's ankles. But I don't think Kyrie will guard Anthony Edwards. I'm thinking Derek Jones will probably guard Anthony Edwards, or they'll do triple, because that wouldn't be a good look for Kyrie to play defense on Anthony Edwards when you need him to run point guard and score. But I'm looking forward to see these two teams. Now, the offensive players, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic, and Kyrie is going to get all the glory and all the hype going into this series. But both of these teams have great defense. And I feel like both of these teams are prepared to go toe-to-toe and matched up well against Denver. I feel like the bodies Dallas had with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic scoring, I think they can, put bodies. They could have put Derek Jones on Jokic. They could have put Lively and Gafford on Jokic. Would they able to stop Jokic? No, but they could have worn him down at the end of the game, as you've seen what Minnesota did. So Dallas and Minnesota I'm just excited to see the matchups, man. Like, who's going to guard Luka? Who's going to guard Anthony Edwards? Can Kyrie become the Kyrie of the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Brooklyn Nets that can explode for like 30 any game? Or is he going to be less aggressive and facilitate? And the way Dallas is winning after they got Gafford and P.J. Washington, it seems like they slowing the game down a lot. So, I mean, they're more defense orientated than offense. Back in the day, you had 2 Dallas philosophies. You had, we're just going to outscore you, and that's how we're going to win games. But they found out you can't outscore anybody if you can't stop anybody. So now, when they won the championship against the Miami Heat, they had Tyson Chandler. They had great perimeter defenders like Jason Terry, Michael Finley, great defenders. This Dallas team has great defenders. P.J. Washington, Derrick Jones, Gafford, Lively. They're going to be patrolling, that paint area. So Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, they're going to have to work for their defensive rebounds and offensive rebounds. And then, on the other hand, defensively, can Rudy Gobert stop the lobs from getting through to Lively, Gafford, and Derrick Jones? And will Derrick Jones hit those wide open threes? Because he's not a three-point shooter, but you leaving people open like Derrick Jones, teams leave Derrick Jones open, that's shooting practice. It's just like if you're going to hit him or not. So I'm excited about this Western Conference Finals. So I was listening to a podcast, Lakers Nation, because I'm a diehard Laker fan, and they said something interesting after Boston eliminated Cleveland from the playoffs. They said Boston has the easiest road to the finals, and the Eastern Conference is so weak. The Eastern Conference is not weak. Injuries decimated the Eastern Conference. They just did. You start off with the Knicks. Before the season even ended, the Knicks were expecting to get, a healthy Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson with OG Anunoby, DeFranco, and Josh Hart, and they was going to make a run at the finals. They was like, what, second in the East, I believe? So they were ready to make a run for the finals, but Randle got hurt. Then you got the Milwaukee Bucks against the Indiana Pacers. Giannis got hurt. You can't tell me that Giannis with the Milwaukee Bucks would have lost to the Indiana Pacers. No way. Dame Lillard was hitting his stride towards the end of the season as the games meant more and more. He was ready for Dame time. But right when the playoffs started, they said Giannis wasn't going to be available for like the first 2 or 3 games. This nigga ain't come back at all. So then we had the playoff series we all been loving. The heated rivalry between Boston and the Miami Heat. These teams went to the finals, in the 2000s, the Heat went to the finals twice. Boston went to the finals once. So this was a series we thought was going to go 7 games. But it didn't, because playoff Jimmy got hurt right when the Heat tied the series, I think. Maybe not, but he got hurt during the beginning of the season. Then you got Kristaps Porzingis. He gets injured. And that was the key piece. Many people thought Boston needed to win the championship this year and come out the East. So he gets banged up. But you still got the stars, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, veterans like Al Horford, and Derek White. Then the Cleveland Cavaliers. Jared Allen missed the game. Jared Allen missed 2 games against Orlando. After Game 7, when they went to go to Boston and play them in the second round, he was not going to be able to play. Then I think even Donovan Mitchell missed the last few games of that Boston series. He couldn't come back. So injuries decimated the East. So it's not like the East was weak, but they just had a lot of injuries, and a lot of people are not bringing that up. Injuries had a whole lot to do with what's going on in the Eastern Conference and who's standing. The healthiest team with no injuries is the Indiana Pacers. So can they go to the finals? Because they're the only one that didn't get hit with the injury bug yet. Michigan! I don't know if you can see on the background on the TV, but it's Michigan playing. I don't know if y'all old enough, but remember Keith Jackson used to always cover the Rose Bowl and used to like Michigan. This the granddaddy, the Rose Bowl, Michigan. It used to always be Michigan against the top Pac-10 team. Ohio State wasn't really doing nothing back then. They caught on towards the 2000s. That's when Ohio State was winning all the time. But yeah, I want to get to J.J. McCarthy because I swear to God, I would have thought this dude was the Illuminati. Like, y'all niggas always say people like, oh, Jay-Z, Will Smith, French Montana, they Illuminati, DJ Khaled, and they putting out dope shit, been working hard for years. But J.J. McCarthy did the bare minimum for 2 years in Michigan, just handed the ball off. Best running game in the nation, best offensive line in the nation, best defense in the nation. They won the national championship. But it wasn't because of J.J. McCarthy. Like, these scouts was saying he was the second coming. Like, people like Denver should trade up. Maybe Sean Payton will give up 2 draft picks and Pat Surtain to move up the draft J.J. McCarthy because he might not be there past number 5. Like, people was drunk. And it's a shame because it was a disconnect, a huge disconnect between experts and fans. Because the fans that was in the market for quarterbacks did not want J.J. McCarthy. Like, they would have settled for Penix or Bo Nix if they couldn't get May, Daniels, and Caleb Williamson. And they always talked about, oh, Penix is a second rounder. The medicals. His injuries happened 2 years ago. What's a better way to prove you're not injury prone than coming after those 2 injury prone years you had than having 2 Heisman caliber years after that? He would have won the Heisman this year. He beat Bo Nix twice, beat Caleb Williams, but Jaden Daniels in the SEC had a John Madden-like season, so no way the LSU quarterback wasn't going to win it. So from a huge, unbelievable season, Penix would have been your Heisman Trophy, but he had a second-round grade. So all the experts were saying dumb shit like, oh, J.J. McCarthy, the athleticism just jumps out at you. So hold on. This is how white people ride for their quarterbacks. So J.J. McCarthy, that had pedestrian stats and handed the ball 70% of the time, you say his athleticism jumps out at you, right? And teams that's in the upper teens should trade into the top 5 and get him. But when Lamar Jackson won his Heisman and he passed for 1 million yards, had 1 million touchdowns, ran for 1 million times, Mel Kiper, people that have been doing this shit for years were saying, oh, if you want a quarterback that's going to end up playing wide receiver, draft Lamar Jackson. But J.J. McCarthy, a white dude, they can't even find highlights for him. All his highlights was him throwing the ball to slow white blocking tight ends on 2nd and 1 while they up by 30 against Indiana. Anybody don't think you running the ball on 2nd and 1. You up by 30. You see what I'm saying? And it's 2nd and 1 against Indiana, a sucky team. Like, so J.J. McCarthy didn't go in the top 5, so that confirms he is not the Illuminati. But Penix was drafted before him. Your boy, McCarthy failed in Minnesota right in time. Even my Broncos said do not trade for J.J. McCarthy. Even if J.J. McCarthy would have failed at 12, our fan base is very knowledgeable and wanted Bo Nix or Penix. They didn't want J.J. McCarthy. They just didn't. So now J.J. McCarthy is in Minnesota. You got Addison. You got Hawkinson. You got the all-pro beast, Justin Jefferson. But the thing is, J.J. McCarthy is not used to throwing the ball 1 million times. He used to hand it off. Now, you got Aaron Jones who can get you 1,100 to 1,200 yards and catch the ball out of the backfield. But at his age, I don't think you want him as your every down back. So they're going to do the running back by committee. So Aaron Jones might not get in the rhythm like you needed him to get in rhythm, but he is a good passer out of the backfield. So I don't see why J.J. McCarthy wouldn't start. Here's the quarterbacks that should start. Drake May, Bo Nix, Caleb Williamson, Jaden Daniels, and, well, I don't know. People are saying Drake May shouldn't start and Bo Nix shouldn't start, but I believe Bo Nix is going to start because of Sean Payton. But, yeah, those J.J. McCarthy, I feel like you start all these quarterbacks. Michael Penix is the only one you don't start because you pay a veteran that's real capable and Kirk Cousins. And I don't know why people was mad at that, because Kirk Cousins is only going to take you to the second round and no further. At least with Michael Penix, you got a young quarterback that can throw the ball on a dime. You can have him grow, and maybe he'll get past the second round and go to a Super Bowl. But yeah, it's even hard to find good highlights of J.J. McCarthy, and they were just gassing them. I did not like that at all. Like, I think that there was a few experts, and I think it was more than a few experts that had a second round grade on J.J. McCarthy, but Michigan is a powerful program. People love Jim Harbaugh, and they won a national championship. They tried to keep those guys quiet. The people that had, a second round grade on J.J. McCarthy, they wanted to keep that quiet. They didn't want a lot of people, hearing about that. They wanted to push a narrative like J.J. McCarthy was a once-in-a-lifetime prospect. So he got to show and prove in Minnesota. I mean, if he ends up being a bust, it seems like GMs, front office people was just having a smoke screen all along. Because I don't think nobody was thinking about picking him in the top 5. Nobody that gets a paycheck from the NFL, because people had the assets to trade up for him and they didn't. So, J.J. McCarthy is not the Illuminati. But they had me thinking for a second.